Good morning, all my friends. I have so many things I want to talk about today. My thoughts have been provoked, um, but I know I won't get to them all. But for starters, I guess I want to cover a couple things. So, what is it that I want, me personally, um, in my struggles? How would I want resolution to take place? Okay, well, yes, it feels. I know I've taken a stand for the bigger picture, and I want some justice for myself and other adoptees. And what does that look like for me? Well, that's a tricky one, and even I find it hard to put words to it exactly because someone said like maybe you're Todd, or maybe you're Brian, like maybe you're these two different things, right? You're where you were born, you're who you were born to, and you were um, how you were raised. It gets convoluted and confusing. At the end of the day, those two scenarios require that I choose. Well, I'm these people's child, or I'm these people's child. It's nature versus nurture. So we're back into that binary dichotomy, I think is the proper wording for that. Whereas, well, which is it? Is it this one or this one? Well, you know what? After all said and done, it's neither. I'm something completely new. I don't belong to them, and I don't belong to them. So what and who am I? And I think that's what I'm trying to get at with this whole adoption thing is that I've come to the understanding and realization in running the gambit that, I mean, even if you go back to your birth family, you've been raised differently. You are a set of experiences and understandings that has changed your biological makeup and DNA beyond the ability to just simply go back. And I think we eventually, like when we do after the reunion and these things, here's where the disappointments and things come in because now we find that we've gotten there, we've gotten the things we were missing, and yet something is still we're still not connected there. And that's my experience. Um, so what does that mean? Well, ultimately, what it means is I'm coming out of these two scenarios and I'm saying neither. I want special rights for me because what was done to me is irreversible and it created a new me. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, the problem with moving forward and the journey I've been on tends to be that, okay, I'm bright, all right. Um, I I'm able to speak fairly clearly, I think, and get my points across. I do lean towards the intellectual, so I try to think things through. But where does that leave me with the Canadian government? And let's not just lay it at the Canadian government's feet. I mean, it's at the forefront of progressive retardation in a big way, and it's terrifying. But I want to use an allegory to describe what's going on with our legislations and our laws and whatnot. When I was working in the car industry, we would get paid a certain amount of bonus money from the parts department if we sold parts over and above on, a brand new truck. So there was one day, and the economy in Alberta does when it's high, it brings out the yahoos and the people who are not good with money and like to flaunt it and are idiots. And I mean, materialism is its own disease, and I respect that. I do, and I think in the West we're all caught up in that. So I shouldn't say retards or idiots, but the same time, we had this guy buying a $70,000, $60,000 diesel at the time, and he wanted to put $30,000 worth of parts on the truck. This is the allegory for the Canadian government. Look at us, we got power, we're liberals. We want to, fix everything. Well, these people don't have the brain power to fix everything, for one. For two, um, they're they don't have the capacity for critical thinking, right? They're not thinking past, well, it's not very nice when people say bad things. Okay, well, we'll make that illegal. Okay, all right, you're not thinking. You're not thinking clearly at all. Zero. So just stop. But the point I'm trying to make is that this guy with 30,000 worth of parts, well, you put on $10,000, you don't run into any problems. Put on, $15,000 worth of parts, no problems. You get into $30,000 worth of parts, well, all of a sudden, parts are not matching up. So once we got the parts this guy wanted on the truck, we couldn't close the hood. There was all sorts of issues because it doesn't all fit together properly. So here is what we've run into in the United States, Canada, the Commonwealth, the whole works, in that we had a basic constitution, a basic ideology that provided freedoms for its citizens and order, and required some cooperation, and it fit together nicely. Well, what happened since then? Well, corruption, stupidity, idiocy, people not thinking critically, etc., etc. And now we have a system that does not work. Okay, so that's where I'm at. I'm using this broken system, and I'm using it in a stubborn sort of way. Whereas you know, I've I've tried to bypass and work around it, and and now I finally get to this point where it's like, okay, well, I don't have a license. Why don't you have a license? Because I didn't pay my child support. Why didn't you pay your child support? Because the government, through misaligned legislation, kept my license a second and third time over my first impaired. Why'd you have an impaired? Because I was assaulted at a party and hit in the head and left, and have no recollection of what happened or why, but I was fleeing, apparently in fear of being assaulted. Okay, well, so you drank and drove. I don't know. Well, why did you plead guilty? Because the punishment was worse if I took it to court and was found innocent, and it was doubly worse if I took it to court and was found guilty. So I pled guilty because it was the least amount of headache and punishment. So what is that? Well, in a way, it's extortion. Okay, well, what's the problem there? Well, the problem is that they take your license before they find you guilty. So they're punishing you before you've had your day in court, which is against the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Okay, well, why don't they know about that? Well, it was in the Sun News as of 2017, so they do know about it. It's been going on for years. Well, why aren't they doing anything about it? They did do something about it in BC. The BC courts took it to thing. Well, where's the problem? Problem is I went to BC where they corrected it. Well, how did they correct it? Well, now they extort people. If you take their punishment willingly, you submit and consent to it, then you get, this 3-month thing, and you're back on the road in 1.5 to 3 months. Well, why didn't you cash in on that? Well, I couldn't because I pled guilty here in Alberta. And then when I went to BC, if you get found guilty there in BC and don't just take this punishment via whatever, then they hammer you. And that's what I got. So I got punished twice in Alberta and BC, and they doubled it up basically. And what happened with that? Well, I was kept from my work and my job. Why didn't you find other work? I tried to. I was overqualified for work in my field. Why didn't you go back to other works? Well, I messed up my back and my legs waiting tables for 10 years in fine dining because I worked and worked and worked. Anyways, it's this cyclical process that I've gotten trapped in. And the government itself admits it's misaligned legislation. They sit there and say, we know it's wrong, but it's the law. This, I'm talking to you, Canadian government. Your employees say, we know it's wrong, but it's the law. Okay? So that's what's going on. That should be very serious. You're violating our rights and freedoms. That's very serious. But none of you seem to be taking it very seriously. So I, a private citizen, have to do that. And that's what I'm doing. I'm taking this very seriously. And unfortunately, the people who do understand and see, and some of you who are like, well, this is a problem, there's got to be a solution. Well, I'm fairly bright. And there isn't really a solution that doesn't expose the fact that there's some corruption and idiocy going on here. And at the end of the day, it leads into much bigger situations, bigger ideologies, and bigger concepts that are a little beyond me and not the arena that I'm used to. So it's getting political, and I'm a fish out of water. I really am. So I do appreciate ideas being thrown at me. I appreciate the concepts, but do try to understand that I am bright and I have tried a lot of these things. And don't get yourselves in the situation I'm in where you're, emotionally wrapped up in solving this problem, because in trying to solve the problem, I found in a way my purpose. In that, if I can do the right things and I can change the system for the better for others and myself, well, we're heading towards a utopia, right? We're heading towards a place where things make sense, where logic and reason come back into our lives. And unfortunately, when we turn on the televisions or open the newspaper or whatever, we see that logic and reason is becoming a very rare commodity in our world. I mean, we can pick and choose wherever we want to go here. We can look at the Catholic Church, we can look at the Trump, we can look at Trudeau, we can look at South Korea, North Korea, we can look at all these crazy things and start going, okay, we have some serious, crazy, and retarded people running the show right now. How did they get into power? How did they get control, authority, this, that, and the other thing? And how did they accumulate it to a degree where they're able to make people's lives miserable? And on top of that, affect the family units, affect the spiritual, moral, like decay of our societies. So what is the goal here? Well, in taking on this venture, I have profited health-wise. My health has become better. I've lost 50 pounds of toxic weight. Okay, I'm probably a bit skinny, but I can work on that. Mentally, I've taken up an ability to cut through the bullshit and not see things the way I want to see them, but see things a little bit more how they are. And I'm not saying that I'm enlightened. I've been enlightened over and over and over and over again in certain areas and this, that, and the other thing. But if someone thinks they're enlightened, then they need to go back to the drawing board, because we're in an infinite process here of evolution of our spiritual selves. And even that, I don't know. The more I learn, the less I know. Okay. But I do have experiential knowledge. If I do this or someone does that, and I can see how things fit together, it's an awareness, right? So I have an awareness of the world around me, and I have an awareness that some things are being done improperly and heading in a direction that is going to be off balance and off kilter. So all those things being said, thank you for taking a concern in my life and my well-being, and offering me your encouragement and your kind words and compliments and these things about myself. Um, I am far, far from perfect, and I'm plagued with issues and problems, but I'm working on those, and that is part of the journey as well. So through all this, and through these headaches, and having to give up family and emotional ties and connections to things that maybe um, weren't real. Okay. Um, I've found that my purpose is to try to continue to correct my issues like the ADD and personality disorders, etc. And don't try to say like we don't think you have a personality disorder. We all do. You crack open that DSM, anyone does it. Well, you're going to have to take a look at yourself, and when you do, you realize that you weren't raised properly. No one was. That's the impossibility of being raised properly. I mean, it just, we can look at they're raised better, but there's different factors at play here, and maybe I mean, comparing people to animals is probably the best way to do it, right? A fish being raised by a bear is probably going to have a hard time. A giraffe being raised by a monkey, etc., right? That that people are different and they've evolved differently biologically um, to cope with very complex and different scenarios and situations, right? A kid in Africa is going to evolve differently than some kid in China or South America or Canada or the North Pole, right? They're going to evolve differently, and that includes mental functions, etc., etc. So that is not taken into account. Somehow we're dropped here thinking um, that physically that we can all just be interchangeable, and that's just not true. I mean, we're all individual snowflakes, if you want to call it that, and we all deserve to be treated with a modicum of respect and tolerance and understanding that we're going to have our challenges in life, and we appreciate the support of our community and our family and our nation and our people, etc., etc. And if someone's struggling, then let's help them, to the best of our ability, not in some democratic sort of way where it's law that we help people. Nobody wants to be helped if someone has to be forced to help you at the point of a gun. That's not help, right? And it's not when we're given the opportunity to help someone, there's a sense of that we've done the right thing. There's a sense of achievement. There's a beautiful sense. There's a beautiful gift in giving. The government's taken that away from us. They're trying to be the benevolent ones, and yet they're forcing people to help, but they're not helping, right? Because that help is not willing. It's taken, um, and it doesn't work. That can never work when you're forcing someone to do the right thing. At the point of a gun, that's tyranny, and we need to fight against that. And that becomes the ultimate evil in our world, right? Because if you're controlling someone completely, well, that person loses themselves, and then they're just an object, right, of a piece of material. And that's the evil of the world, to treat a person or any living being as a simply a piece of matter for our enjoyment and our use. And that's not here. That's not it, right? The world around us is the creation, and it needs to be treated as such. And we are part of that creation, and we should demand to be treated as such. Um, because without freedom within this creation, um, it's not worth it. It becomes a hell on earth, and we need to avoid that and fight against it and struggle against it. And that should be our ultimate challenge. not this materialistic pursuit of who's got a better truck or car or house or this, that, and the other thing. Symbolically, shelter is shelter, and we should get back to that. Whereas this materialistic pursuit is just gotten ridiculous and silly, and it really depreciates the divinity of the human being. So anyways, sorry, I ran a little bit long today. I babbled. I'm sure I didn't cover all the things I wanted to. But again, thanks for all the support. I appreciate everyone's concern about me, and I appreciate comments and suggestions and all these things. And I'll work my way through it. I've got court coming up June 27th to just simply have the back child support reduced and try to get these maintenance people off my back while I'm not working, right? Like, they put the cart in front of the horse. Like, give us our money. Okay, well, I need my license to work. Well, give us our money first and we'll give you your license. No, you see how that doesn't work, right? And it's just basic logic that these people seem to want to fight against. And my God, is logic and reason. Okay, and there is logic and reason that shows me a created universe. There is logic and reason that supports a spiritual world surrounding us. So the point being is that, yeah, if you go against logic and reason, you go against my God and you go against me. So let's all get on the same page of logic and reason, because the mass populace is being lured into insanity, which is anti-logic and reason, and we can't have that, and I won't have that, and I will fight to my dying breath against that, because I fucking hate idiots. All right, bye.